Hi friends, Robert here for Diverse Opals. Welcome back to our YouTube channel, and a big thank you to those of you who have been subscribing. You may have noticed that we've reached 1,000 subscribers, and we want to thank you for those of you who have been faithfully watching. And in fact, I would say that what we're doing today is the result of one of our subscribers making a request, asking us to do a video on doublets. Now, what you're looking at is actually a range of doublets that I've just done recently, different sizes, different shapes, and you can understand that these things can actually be quite pretty. If you have opal that's perhaps thin, and I'll show you some material like that in a minute, we can make use of it because opal doesn't always come in big chunks. This is some typical Cooper opal that I have, and you can see it's very thin. I haven't needed to grind this flat at all. This is how it's actually come from the mine. Very thin seam material, and this is the sort of stuff that's ideal for making doublets. It's probably a little bit grey. Well, I'm pretty confident it's going to make some pretty stones. You know, when you buy chunky pieces and you've got to start slicing it up, there's a little bit more work involved. But when it comes like this, it's easy to work with. All you have to do is flatten a side or both sides to start with, to decide which side has the best colour. Now, when it comes to backing, you should be using material that is in fact can work with opal. You don't want to use anything synthetic. Synthetic in the way of a plastic. You may think that it's okay because it's black, but it's not ideal. And what we have in front of you here is black potch from Matador. You can get black potch also from Lightning Ridge, and this is good because it's actually the same type of material as opal, because it is in fact opal. So we have that. This is a piece of obsidian. Is volcanic glass, and glass and opal do go together quite well. A lot of people do use glass when they're actually making triplets, and some obsidian is actually not transparent. This piece is a little bit transparent. You've actually got lines that run through it, and this is a piece that's been cut off of it, not off this particular piece, but it has been sliced off, and it has also been painted, and it's been painted with an aerosol black. Some people use texture color, not my ideal choice, excuse me. So you can use an aerosol paint, good quality. In the past I have used a product called VHT Bull Bar paint. It's very hard. Unfortunately I can't get it anymore. If you can find it where you're at, I would recommend that you use it. Allow enough time for it to dry. This is very important. You cannot rush the drying process, and sometimes it'll take 72 hours to dry. So this is a slice of obsidian, and this is what I'll actually be using today. And lastly, we have boulder, and this is a piece of sandy boulder. A lot of people are using boulder these days for making doublets because it aesthetically is pleasing. This is as I said, this is sandy. You can get actually a hard ironstone boulder. Once again, when you cut it, when you finish the back, it actually looks quite pretty. So these are the options that I would perhaps look for. If you can't get black potch and you do want to use potch, you can use white potch. But as I said, in instances of where you don't have a good dark background, I would recommend that you paint the surfaces. And lamp black is another alternative. We do have lamp black, and we do supply it. You mix it with some alcohol, and we've done this process in one of our videos on triplets. So if you want to look up at our videos, one of our videos on triplets, you'll see the same processes in using lamp black. So that's the choices we have in the way of backing. Today we're going to work with these pieces. They're not overly big, but this is a piece that I spoke about before, from Cooper Pedy. This is from Andamuka. This one here is actually from Minterby. It's very, very thin. How far we'll get with it, I don't know. And this one here, I'm not too sure about. Could be from Andamuka. But the reason why I've included this one is this, that it actually has colour on one side. And the reason why I've included it is I want to talk about how we will stick this on. Which way we'll stick it on, because this is an important part of making doublets. If you stick it on the wrong way, you don't get a stone. So what we'll do now is we will flatten this, because we need to make sure that all these are flat. This one needs to be flattened. This one needs to be flattened. These two are already done. These two here need to be flattened as well. And once we've done that, that'll help us choose a side that we should use in making the doublet. Alright, so I'm here at my grinder now. This is where I'll be doing the flattening of this Cooper Pedy Opal. As I said previously, we want to get this, well, we actually need a uniform thickness. We need a flat surface to be able to glue down. And so I'm using a sintered metal bond diamond lap, and this wheel has traditionally been used in the opal industry for making opal triplets. They're not that easily accessible these days, but maybe you have a plated diamond lap and they're okay. I like to use this because the cutting surface is quite free. So I'm using a mask. Even though I'm using water, I'm very careful about the possibility of introducing silica into my body. You can see we've got some quite nice colour here to work with. I'm still chasing a little bit. I don't know if you can see it right here where my fingernail is pointing. There's a little bit of a hole in the surface. My intention is actually to get rid of that, so we'll have a completely flat surface. So that will be the end of that piece. Now with regards to this piece that I started out with, I was endeavouring to catch the full bar. Now the bar was not going, let's say, parallel to the surface. It was in fact dipping away. So I was chasing the colour, and that meant as I was lapping, I was pushing on one side more than the other to take us through to eliminate the potch bar and expose all of the colour. So you'll have to experiment a little bit yourself when you're doing this, when you're working on doublets like this yourself, just to try and push where you need to get to a nice flat surface where you're working with hopefully a flat bar of colour. Alright, so we're back from the grinder now, and we've actually finished flattening off the opal, and the next stage of this is to actually glue the opal slices onto the piece of obsidian that we're working with. And I'm using my hot plate again. This is an industrial quality hot plate. The reason why I'm using a hot plate is I want it to dry quickly. When this is actually a 24-hour glue, and it can set quicker and stronger if heat is in fact used. So what we'll do is we'll apply equal amounts of this to just a piece of cardboard. Just keep in mind that if you are going to use this process, you should ensure that all the surfaces that you're working with are in fact warm. They do glue much better, adhere much better if they're all nice warm. It's not much use putting something hot onto a cold surface. So that's something good to keep in mind. These amounts are sort of approximate. They don't have to be exact because there is an allowance that the manufacturers of this product put into place. You may not have Yoo-hoo, you might have an Araldite based product. I would try and avoid a 5-minute or a fast setting glue. I would recommend a long setting glue, and I would say that's preferential to the process. And I know there are quite a few different types of products out there in the marketplace that are actually quite suitable for this, but try and find a 24-hour glue or something that is long setting, not a 5-minute glue if you can help it. So just give it a good mix. It's already quite warm, the surface is quite warm, and so the glue is actually moving quite quickly. Now, although the backing material is black, I like to, at times, just like to take advantage of adding a little bit of pigment to this, and what I'm adding today is a little bit of lamp black. You can see it's not much. What I actually had on the dop stick in the way of glue was sufficient to pick it up, and you can see very quickly it starts to mix with the glue. So it's just a bit of a double way of protecting yourself to make sure that everything is in fact dark. If your opal is really high quality, really nice crystal, you may not need to be too concerned about this. If you're going to use this process, don't put too much lamp black in. It's unnecessary, and it may actually weaken the integrity of the glue. So just make sure I'm gluing it on the right side. Yes, this is the right side. And I put the glue on the surface. Just make sure we've got it evenly on the surface. It's important that when you're doing doublets that both of your surfaces are in fact flat. It affects the way the stone looks if you're looking at the side of the stone, and it can be a bit of a question if there was ever a problem that it may lift. It may, I'm not saying it will, but it may. Here's our first piece. You can see maybe in the viewfinder that this side here is a little bit unflat. It's not flat. This is the side that I've actually flattened, and it's got that matte look about it. So we'll start out by putting this one on here. And we just drop it on the top. The next piece we're doing is this piece here. Now it's obvious which side we're going to glue down because we've got a ridge here. That will be, this will be the bottom, very obviously, and this will be sitting on the top. So we'll come back to how these settle down. Now I'll put this one on next because it's a little bit of a big one. Now you can see here the dirt. You don't have to flatten off your opal perfectly because this is going to come off during the actual grinding process anyway. So make sure that the surface you want to glue down is, and it's obvious in this case, is in fact flat, and perhaps has the best colour on the back of it as well. So we'll just drop this in here. And this piece here, this was a piece that I explained had a bit of the bar wasn't in, but I was chasing the colour. It was a little bit potchy here, but hopefully when we finish the stone it's going to turn out really nice. So we'll drop that on here as well. Now ideally you should try and make the most of the surfaces that you're working on. If you've got sufficient stones, try and use as much, fill it in as much as you can. Now this piece here I've left until last, and the reason being is I want to point out that you can see in the viewfinder that one side has more colour than the other. When we're gluing this down, the side that has the best colour should be glued down. The reason being is if we glue this part down the opposite way and the colour's in fact facing up, when we grind the stone down, the colour will disappear and all you'll be doing is seeing potch. So please keep that in mind, that when you are in fact gluing down, glue the side that actually has the best colour to ensure that you have the best results when the grinding process is complete. So what I'll do now is just gently rub this a little bit. They might be a little bit, they feel a little bit like they're floating. I'm just rubbing out a little bit of the glue, and at the present they don't look anything particularly appealing, but it's still early days. So I mean, this one here looks we can see some nice colour in this meant to be piece, and hopefully we can retain as much colour as we possibly can, because it's a bit thin around this edge here, and during the grinding process or the lapping process some of that will disappear as we actually change the shape of this as well. So okay, we've finished with the gluing, and it's actually quite hard. It's probably been about half an hour, and pushing my fingernail into the surface I'm making some little indentations into it, but it's quite hard enough for actually proceeding with this next process, which will be to trim these pieces out. So most diamond saw blades are designed to cut hard materials, not soft materials. Yes, they'll cut through your fingernail, but they won't cut through your flesh. Alright, so keep that in mind, and we'll get started here. Plenty of water. Sometimes you might need to put your thumb on or your finger on the blade just to straighten it up if it's a bit thin. It may have a tendency to wander around. Okay, I'm going to be working on my Gem Master grinder now. I'm using a sintered metal bond diamond wheel around about a 170 grit. And what we need to do is to just clean up around the edges of the stone. I finished on the grinder. I thought I'd actually do more work on the grinder for taking off the top, but I think I'm going to go to my flattening wheel and to do this a little bit more accurately. Working with a curved surface to get a flat surface can be a little bit tricky at times, and I'm not going to take that risk today. So what I've done with the grinding wheel, the round wheel, is to just clean up around the edges of the stone. I like to try and preserve my flattening wheel because it's actually a soft metal bond. This particular wheel is in fact a hard metal bond. So we'll go to the flattener and we'll just take all these things down, and hopefully by then the colour will start to produce a bit better, and after that we'll do some dopping. So working on my flattening wheel, I can actually see easily the thickness of the opal compared to the backing, and because I'm doing it like this, it's very easily seen, and that's the way I like to work when I'm doing
this type of work with flat surfaces. So we'll keep going. So how much we take off is something that we have to do very carefully. We can see the colour of the opal was starting to change, because as we're going thinner, we've actually got a different aspect of the way we look at it. The colour becomes richer. So we will continue to go down a little bit more. I'm looking for a uniform thickness, because it was a little bit thinner here on one side and on the other side. And so that you have to control the pressure that you have in your hand to be able to get that type of finish as well. So we'll keep going, and from here on we have to just be very careful about the pressure that we use, because we can take off too much too quickly and end up losing the whole piece. So we'll just keep going gently. Now we have to keep in mind that we still have some sanding to do, so we've got to be careful not to go too thin on our diamond wheel, because if we go too thin there won't be much left for our sanding processes. So keep those things in mind as well. Alright, I've done this piece here, but I've brought this back into the frame to show the comparison of this. Now, you can see there's a lot of pattern here, and it's not necessarily colour I'm talking about, but I'm talking about the pattern in the stone. As a comparison, blue stones like this don't always have a lot of pattern. You can see sometimes just a broad blue flash. They're pretty, but we have to be careful when it comes to flattening these pieces. If we flatten them too much, they basically turn black. And so in a comparison, if we look at the thicknesses here of these two stones, I'm going to try and keep this stone as thick as possible, whereas this one here, if I could, I would take this down thinner, and I might yet still try to do that on the sander. So keep it in mind if you're working with blue stones.
Alright, so we're finished on the grinder. The next stage for us will be to dop it, because we want to be able to manage the stone in some way. We can't really hold these tiny little pieces in our fingers and effectively work with the stone. So having dop sticks is an ideal way to go. These are actually hardwoods, except for this one, which is dowel, softwood. Try to get hardwood. They're actually a bit resistant to the water, that if you're working with water. This time I'm using a quick set epoxy Yoo-hoo. The last one I used was Yoo-hoo as well, but that was a long setting one. This is a fast setting one. So in about 5 to 10 minutes these stones will be ready to work with. So same story, we are working with equal amounts of glue. We don't need a great deal, just enough to dop with them. That'll probably do, and we just get ourselves a dop stick. It's not a dop stick, a toothpick, and mix it up. When you're working with dop sticks, try to make sure that the end of the dop stick is in fact square. These are my regular work dop sticks, and when I've used them once, I clean off the glue with a sander and make sure it's square again, because you want a good clean working surface for the stone to be sitting on. I think we're just about there with regards to this glue, and what we'll do is just put it in, turn it so you get a nice even coating. And because we're doing we need to be able to work with the top of the stone, so we'll just dop the back. It's a little bit, it moves around a little bit at the present, but we can double check on that during the drying process while we're doing the other stone. So I'm just putting in some sand so it can stay there until it dries. One thing I should say about dopping, I have seen people dopping doublets with wax. Don't. The reason being is that when you get it off, quite often you use heat to get them on and heat to get them off, and this will be a problem. It will affect the integrity of the glue that actually holds the stones together. Sorry, the opal and the backing together.
Okay, I'm now on my Matador 2-speed dental lathe, which is my high-speed sander. Fortunately, my sander has the ability to split the speed, so although it normally operates, and I do a lot of sanding at 3000 RPM, today I'm going to be working at 1500. The reason for that is that the obsidian doesn't always respond well to high speed and can crack, can fracture. So I'll be taking my time on this in primarily working my way around the stone like this, but also at a slower speed. It does take less off. I'm working dry, as you can see, dust extractor, Matador dust extractor, and I'm using a mask as well as another form of precaution. Let's go, and we'll go carefully. So I'll start with the bigger stone because the initial starting point of a coarser grade can in fact be quite quick, and on a bigger stone it's not so great. Smaller stones we don't want to risk losing too much. So let's get started. I'll start with the top of the stone. Now we still have some sand here. I was hoping that might have come out by now. It's not, but we'll keep working with the sander and see what actually transpires, because it may come out, it may not. Make sure that when you're doing this, if you are going to use this process, you can use wet wheels as well as if you like, but I like the feel of dry paper. Make sure you have firm pressure. You can't hold a dop stick like this, you'll have no control. So really get as close as you can to the wheel, because that helps you to have far greater control. I'm going to lean a little bit on this side here. In other words, I'm going to apply a little bit more pressure. I'm going to turn this into the sander to try and get that sand out. It may have, it's starting to come out a little bit more. I don't want it to be too thin, but thin isn't too bad because, as I said before, it helps to bring out the colour of these pieces. So just work your way around the stone, taking an even amount of wear or an even amount of cut around the actual, you can see as you're looking around the stone, you're looking for an even thickness. So we'll just keep going. We don't need to rush this. So now we've finished the sanding process. We're now going to be using a polishing machine. This is actually what we call a chrome split leather, and I'm going to be using O-pol polishing powder. Maybe you've got something a little bit different, but what we'll be doing is polishing the edge of the doublet and polishing the top, and this will be the stage just prior to finishing the back. So we'll get on with this. It won't take very long, especially if you've done your sanding processes correctly. Make sure you've got a reasonable amount of water on your leather or your polishing surface. It's going to vary depending upon the type of polishing you're using, whether it be felt or whether it be leather. It's looking quite good. Look for a nice polished edge. This one's a little bit darker. As I said, this would be because there's not as much pattern in the blue, but I'm happy with those as a result, and we'll move on to the next stage. I didn't show the processes of turning the stones over, but it's a similar process to the dopping. I just put them into hot water, the glue softens, and we turn the stone over and we do the back. So what we're going to do now is we're going to be sanding the back as a final, and the actual just a setting edge on this. Now this is my sander. This is a 320 grit paper, and that's all we'll need. If there's too much thickness on the back of your doublet, you may need to use a diamond wheel or an abrasive wheel to take some of that depth down, but today we're just going to be using sandpaper as the final stage of just finishing the stone off. So once again, I'm using a slow speed, and we'll get started on this. Just a moderate pressure, and just a simple touch around the edge of the stone, and we end up with nearly there. We've still got a bit of a mark on the back from where we were actually dopping the stone, so if we want to get rid of that we can, but still it's just not a very long process. So we've just taken this very fine edge off, and it takes off a little bit more in the corners just due to pressure, but we just take this off just so that it sits well in the setting, and also it just cosmetically looks better, and we don't want chipping as well. We don't want any sharp edges. So well, we're back from the workshop, and I want to thank V27 for requesting this tutorial. It came as a request for the processes of making a doublet, and I hope that for anybody that's actually watching this video, that it actually has been of help to you and you've learned something from it. I think we've covered all points that we can. If you perhaps have a question or two that we haven't covered, ask, and we'll do our best to answer that. We've also we're showing a number of stones that we've done during this process, and some of them will be actually for sale on our eBay page. Look out for them. They're very nice stones, and you might find yourself a stone at a relatively good price. Thank you for watching. I'm Robert for Diverse Opals.